Hi everybody, it's Randy with Direct Action.
And Sam from Adaptive State Performance.
And we got a couple of questions to address from folks that have been watching and piping into the YouTube channel, which is awesome. Keep the questions coming and we'll address them as they do come in. We're trying to keep this up once a week or so. There might be a few lags here and there where we might go beyond a week, but you keep your questions coming and we'll do what we can to address them as they come in. All right, so the first one that we're going to address is there was a recent video that we put up about mental health and grit and determination, and there was a couple of questions and comments, I guess, that were posted, so we're going to address those first. And the first one was from a gentleman, I think. Was it a gentleman?
Yes.
Everyone.
Yeah. It was a pretty long question. There was a lot of background in it, but essentially the gist of the comment / question was, I have a friend in my life who I really want to help them in a place where I feel like they're struggling, like they don't really get out, they don't do a lot of socialization. It feels like they need some outlets for whatever's going on in their world. And although I've given them opportunities to join me and some friends for activities, whether it's like going for a hike or going for drinks or whatever it might be, they always turn it down and they just kind of stay at home. And essentially, I don't know what to do. Do I continue to try and give these outlets and opportunities to help her? But at the same time, I'm torn because I kind of feel like cutting her out of my life. I'm really torn and I don't know what to do. And it was nice because somebody else actually commented back and gave some of their own advice too, which was really nice to see. It's really cool when we see you guys in the comment section communicating back and forth. So that was really nice. But essentially that question was, what can be done differently? Do you suggest continuing to try to give her opportunities, or is this maybe the end of the line for the friendship?
It's a good question and a complex component of friendship to be in. I think if I was in that situation, I would continue to attempt to have her involved, or he or she involved, reach out to them every now and again. But if there's that point where by the sounds of it, you're a little bit frustrated with not being able to get through, it might be an opportunity for the advice to be given for that individual to either talk to a complete stranger or talk to somebody completely different than yourself. And here's what I know. When it comes to this type of topic, it's different for everybody. And some people feel very comfortable talking to a complete stranger because there's no stigma. There's no connection to what that person may feel or view them as. So a professional that the individual doesn't know sometimes is the outlet that's most adequate for that particular situation. And then in other situations, people that I have known, for example, for a long time, they would prefer to talk to somebody who they trust and somebody that they can get a no bullshit answer from. And and Sam and I, we've had this discussion a few times where sometimes what we need to hear is hey man, like, get your shit together. And it is a hard way of love, but I think that hard love sometimes is the solution. The reason that I say that so confidently is because everybody is a little bit different. You know this person better than we do, so you know the type of personality that you're dealing with. And that would be my recommendation. So option A, they talk to a complete stranger, somebody that doesn't really know them, and there's no necessarily stigma or judgment that may come to the surface. Option B would be somebody that is not yourself, but they have a level of trust that's already developed with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree big time. And I think sometimes too, people may be silently asking for help. So I don't know if I would necessarily immediately resort to they don't want my help. Maybe they just don't know how to ask for help.
Sure.
So yeah, you can go about it a couple of ways. Maybe instead of saying, I think you need to see a psychologist, because that could definitely backfire, you could approach it from a caring perspective. Like, it does matter to me that you haven't, come out and spent the time with us. I'm concerned about you, or you could say we're concerned about you, and we'd like to help. How can we help? And maybe give them the opportunity to be involved in that process and that discussion of how you can help, and maybe highlight the fact that you value them and your friendship, and it hurts, to know that you're not able to help, and how can you help? Maybe involving them in the process would be a good option too.
I think that's a great piece of advice. Get them involved, let them know that you care about them, and ultimately you just want to help them, right? So there's no negative effect to that. There's no negative consequence to you expressing the fact that you want to help.
And that you care. Yeah.
And that you care.
Absolutely.
So hopefully that helps. Next question that we have is from Nick from Ottawa, here in Ottawa. He's got aspirations of military or law enforcement. So this gentleman, he's on a quest. He wants to be involved in one of those two professions. And what he said to me and what he asked me was, what advice would I give to my 25-year-old self in preparation for selection? Great question. So I think given the context of what I know now in relation to what I knew when I was training for selection. So when I did, for context and for background, I was 23 years old when I started to train for selection. And I kind of had a bit of a couple of hiccups in order to actually get to do selection. So I had literally 3 years to train for it. When I finally did do selection, I was 25 years old when I did selection in 2003, and then I was on SOAC at 26 years old. What advice I would give my 25-year-old self today is I would learn to move better. I would be more proficient with my overall ability to move my body. For an example, when you work with a professional such as Sam or others that have a keen eye to understand when we have asymmetries, so if there's a component of the body that is, left side dominant or right side dominant, having somebody that you work with being able to identify, an under and overdeveloped area of the body is really, really important, because being able to smooth those areas out, or, strengthen your limitations and level out your strengths, we run a lower risk of suffering injuries. So what advice I would give to my 25-year-old self in preparation for selection would be move your body really well, move well. Range of motion, flexibility, really, really important. And then in preparation for selection, there's components that we're going to talk about here in a second, but the overall ability to move your body well and then have a level of muscle endurance that can get you through the grind of what selection puts you through. So that's what the advice I would give this young man.
Right. Yeah. And do you know, was he looking for like tactile advice as well? Like, was he talking just like physically, how can you prepare? Or was he also thinking from a mental standpoint, like maybe a mentality or perspective or mindset? So
good question, because we did talk about offline, we talked about what I did and what I would do differently. So, we can talk about that as well. From a mental perspective, when I trained for selection, there wasn't people like me available. Like, the information was really, there wasn't a lot of information on what was the best principles or best practices to prepare for selection. So I kind of went through it, trained as hard as I possibly could, trained like a savage every day, in and out, put myself through the grinder for days, weeks, and months. And it worked. Like, it worked well for me. Mentally, I was strong because there was no convincing me that I was not going to make it. I really went into selection thinking, the only way that I'm not going to get selected is if they literally remove me from the process, or I'm unable to breathe and function. That would be the only two ways that I would be removed from selection. So I was willing to do pretty much anything to get through it and be the best version of myself while I was on selection. So when I trained, I'm telling you, and if you want, we can have a discussion on how I trained in preparation for selection, because I did some out there things that I put myself in, some risky positions, to be completely honest. But it worked. It worked for me. I made it. Not only did I make it, I think without, tooting my own horn, by the time I finished selection, I was one of the most physically fit and still extremely strong standing at the end. So much so that within 24 hours after selection, I was back in the gym. Right? So body went through a shit kicking, but I was still standing, and I still had some juice in the tank.
That's amazing.
So whatever I did worked. However, there's consequences. Over the years, the accumulation of that training, there's body parts that start to break down. And I do believe that there was a direct correlation with the way that I trained and not giving myself adequate time to recover properly. And it was constant, just train hard, and the body was, always at a deficit. So things start to break down. So I would do things differently. For sure, I would factor in better periodized recovery components, but also better periodized areas to develop and train.
Right. And in your experience, you've trained so many guys looking to get into law enforcement, military, whatever it might be. Do you think that a lot of people fall under the umbrella of you need to train this way with like this amount, this percentage of recovery, this percentage of work, or do you still think it's kind of individual and people need to find their way and find that kind of that niche, like that sweet spot that works the best for them? Like, is there some rules of thumb that you would say apply to the majority of people looking to get into stuff like that? Or
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually it bodes well with another question that was I think I don't know, did you have that one? Or the preparation for selection? Yeah, so this bodes well. So Ryan from Saskatchewan, he asked us specifically about preparing for selection and what energy systems are important. Great question. So yes, now when I'm preparing programs for guys that are directly interested in selecting or being selected for JTF2 selection, I'll help them with the programs knowing that there's a strength component, there's a power component, there's an anaerobic component that is heavily emphasized in overall flexibility and range of motion, all important. Once I get an opportunity to work with the individual, what I find for most of the guys that I've had the opportunity to work with so far, the one thing that I have to really hammer home is how important it is to recover. And when I build the programs, I specifically build them with a recovery component in there, because I know, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, the guys that have aspirations to work at that particular unit, they are high achievers. They are motivated go-getters. And what they will do is if there's any white space in the schedule, they're going to fill it. They're going to fill it and they're going to train harder and they're going to train more. So when I build the programs, I specifically try to design it in a manner that they're forced to take recovery days. That way you give the body time and opportunity to grow, develop, and replenish itself. With that, in preparation for selection, I would say, and actually I'll lean on you for this one, Sam, because you do know, you've got a good understanding of the demands, based on what I shared with you. When it comes to periodization, and what that means is there's components of your training regime that you're going to dedicate just to strength training. There's components that you're going to dedicate just to power. And then there's components that you're going to dedicate for your cardiovascular development and aerobic development. So if you, for an example, were approached by somebody that has aspirations to be successful, when it comes to periodization, what would be the first thing that you would want to see from that athlete or question that athlete on before you even start to think about breaking down a periodization program for them?
Right, and I guess the first thing would be like timeline.
Yep, how much time do you have?
I think that would be one of the first questions I would have, because if somebody shows up and they're like, I'm leaving in 3 months, that's completely different than somebody that's leaving in 12 months.
Right.
What is their current status? Like, what's their baseline would be my next question. Yep. So trying to see if we're keeping it in these three kind of buckets of strength, power, and conditioning. Where are they the strongest? Where are they the weakest? So where does the attention need to be focused and when?
Right.
Which I guess is kind of like more detailed, because that is getting into the nitty gritty of the periodization plan. But yeah, I guess like baseline and timing is probably the most important two things, I would think.
I agree. I would agree 100%. And here's the reality. To be successful in selection, yes, there's a physical component for sure, and there's a strong mental component. So for an example, if the individual reached out to me and said, I'm going on selection and I have 3 months. All right, the very first thing I would say is, we know we have 3 months, that's a factor for sure. What's your baseline at? So I would bring them in, run them through a DA baseline assessment, which is a series of 5 exercises that I put athletes through, and it gives me a really good understanding of their anaerobic ability, their strength, and their muscle endurance, which is really important for the success of selection. And then from there, within that 3 months, there wouldn't be time, in my opinion, there wouldn't be time to focus specifically on explosive power or explosive strength. So it would be overall conditioning. And for those that are interested, that think, oh man, selection, it's 90% mental and it's only 10% physical. Man, no, I'm telling you, think about what it is that you're trying out for. It is the elite of the elite. So yes, there is a lot of mental strength that is required, but there's physical capabilities that are required as well. Mm-hmm. So here's the reality. The more physically fit you are, the more cognitively sharp you're going to be to make wise decisions when you don't have a lot of time or information to make good decisions. So if you are depleted physically, chances are you're going to make questionable calls or decisions that maybe are not ideal. So what I'm suggesting for you is, if you are serious about your training, You're going to train as hard as you possibly can with the time that you have, knowing that your physical ability is only going to take you so far. Your mental strength is going to get you to the finish line. And one thing that's a reality about selection is it's not about just surviving and getting through it. You have to perform, and you have to show and demonstrate that you have the attributes that the organization is looking for. So you can be strong as a truck, you can be tough as a truck, you can lift a truck, but if you are unable to make good decisions, you might not make the cut. Right? So training is really, really important. In the training, so is recovery.
Right, and that definitely I can relate and understand what you were just saying about making sure that you check all the boxes and that you have all of the attributes that they're looking for. It's really important, like you said, to why wouldn't you set yourself up for the most success by being as physically prepared as possible? It's not I don't think beneficial mindset to go in thinking I'm physically enough. And my mental game is strong enough that it'll take me the rest of the way. If you can make yourself physically better, then that's one less thing you have to worry about. You're setting yourself up for a little bit more success. I've worked with athletes in a sport realm who maybe are the best hockey player of their age, of their current level, and they don't get picked up because they have a terrible attitude. You know, like they aren't being looked at by the schools that they think they should be getting looked at because they are a rotten team player, for example. So physically they have everything they need, but mentally it's the opposite of what we were just saying. They don't have the skills. So yeah, it can definitely go both ways, but if you can control 10 variables that will set you up for success, control all 10.
Yes.
Don't neglect like 3 of them and focus on 7.
That's right.
So take advantage of as many things as possible, I think is what you were getting at there.
Yeah, you do what you can in the time that you have, and you know, there's no excuses, right? There's no excuses like, oh, I didn't have the time to train properly. Did you not have the time to train properly, or did you choose to prioritize inadequately so you're not training the things that you need? So being honest about, you know, the 70-30 principle is what I refer to. So when we only have so much time to train. So when we train, we want to be as efficient as we possibly can with our training. So here's what I suggest. You dedicate 70% of your time, your training time, to focus on the things that you're not really good at yet. We'll call those limitations. And then 30% of the time, we want to dedicate to the things that we are already good at, because that is what you're going to revert to when you're under a little bit of stress, when you're under a little bit of duress. So we can't negate it completely. We do want to focus on it, but that's my general rule of thumb, 70-30 principle. So understand, first, be honest with yourself. What are your limitations? And then are you adequately developing those limitations with the right amount of focus and with the right priorities on the right things?
Priorities is super important there, and a super relevant example right now that I can come to from my own experiences. I'm working with a few police officers who are looking to try it, or they're not looking to, they're trying to succeed. They are fully committed to making it into a special unit. They're working 16-hour shifts every day right now because of what's happening in Ottawa. They haven't had a day off in weeks. One of them just had COVID. She's right back into work. They never know when they're gonna have a day off. And they still, every day, they're like, I still am gonna train. Or not every day, but like, you know, at least 4 days a week, even though I'm working this terrible schedule. I might get home at 3 a.m. off a 16-hour shift. They're still training for an hour, you know? It is a priority. It is not negotiable to miss their training in this time.
And when you have somebody that takes their training very seriously as a professional, they are really connected with their why they're doing what they're doing. It is easy for us to, well, not for everybody, generally speaking, it's easy to get derailed by listening to the white noise. You know, sometimes I'll hear, you know, conversations like, oh, I want to try out for this, but I'm too young, or I'm not ready yet. Says who? Says like, who says that you're too young? And who says that you're not ready? You be the one to decide. You show that organization what you're made of, they will be the one to decide whether or not you're adequate, you meet the demands now, or if you need a little bit more time. But I wouldn't say let anybody put limitations on what your abilities are. 100%, man. Like you do what you can with the time that you have, and you put your best foot forward. So, you know, all those naysayers and whatnot sometimes will derail people, and then they end up making excuses for themselves. I worked a 16-hour shift. Maybe I won't train today. I just fought COVID. Maybe I won't train today. Those are excuses, man. Those are excuses where you're looking for an outlet. Be stronger than that. persevere, overcome, and in fact, look at it like the opposite. I just had to work 16-hour days. Fuck it. I'm in the gym and I'm getting after it. And nobody's stopping me, right? Look at it like, I just got COVID, and you know what? It's a flu. You're gonna heal from it, and when you do, your immune system's gonna be stronger. Use that strength. I just healed from COVID, boom. I'm top of the world, bring it. Whatever you got, I'm ready to tackle it, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a mindset thing. It's a mentality shift where, yes, there are gonna be obstacles. There are gonna be setbacks, for sure. But how you handle those obstacles and setbacks is what separates, in my opinion, the difference between the champion and the contender.
For sure. And it's all about how you frame it too. Like one of my clients who is dealing with this situation right now, I said to her, this is an awesome opportunity to practice doing something you don't want to do when you're exhausted.
Yes.
When nothing is going your way, when you feel like absolute shit and you still have to perform. What an awesome opportunity to practice that. Because not many people will be in a situation where they get to practice that extreme level of fatigue and still having to perform, and you have to be able to do that.
You have to be able to do that. Yes.
If you frame it that way, it's not like, oh, I have to train at 3 a.m. after a 16-hour shift. It's, wow, the next time I have to get up at 3 a.m. and do something after being exhausted for 16 hours, I've already been here.
Yes.
I've already seen this.
Yes.
I can do this.
And the words that you just chose is awesome. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I have to train at 3 a.m. I get to train at 3 a.m. I get to do this. Like there's not a lot of people out there that are excited about training at 3 a.m. Be that person. Like, man, I get to train at 3 a.m. I'm on my 2 feet. My ticker is still working. I get to do this. Or, oh man, that's bullshit, man. Squash all that stuff. That's just white noise. That's just distracting you from what it is that you're trying to achieve.
And I think you're setting yourself up for a little bit of failure when you have that mentality too. I have to do this.
Yes.
I have to do that.
We don't have to do anything except be good people.
Yeah.
All right, next question is from Abdullah in Toronto. He's got some issues with pull-ups. So he's got some aspirations that he shared with me, which is awesome. And I hope to help him along the way. And I'd like to lean on Sam for this particular question. So picture you're an individual, you have a goal, you want to be able to pull your body and your chin over a bar. So pull-ups are not easy for everybody, and like anything, they can be developed and you can become stronger at that particular movement. So for this individual, Sam, he's struggling to do pull-ups. Right now, he's confident that he can do 3 consecutive, clean, strict pull-ups. But of course, he wants to do more. What advice would you give him to help develop his pull-up ability?
That I get this all the time from people. Pull-ups are a do-it exercise, and if you don't do it, you lose it exercise. It's something that you just have to get the reps in. If you never do a pull-up and all you do is pressing exercises, you're never going to do a pull-up. But if you're consistently exposing your body to the thing that it cannot do, eventually it will do it. And there's many alternatives to improving your pull-up game. So if you just always walk up to the bar and try to do a maximum number of repetitions of pull-ups, if you always hit the ceiling of 3, slowly but surely you will start to do more. Maybe you might do 1 more every 2 weeks, let's say, taking that approach.
Yeah.
But there's other ways to develop that strength. So add a band, give yourself a little bit of assistance so that you don't only ever do 3. Maybe now you're doing sets of 8 because you're getting a little bit of assistance. Maybe in a different workout where pull-ups aren't on the program, between sets you go and do 2 pull-ups. You do a sub-maximal effort of the thing that you can't quite do enough of yet, and it's repetitions, it's exposure, it's telling your body, we are going to get better at this. I'm going to keep making you do this until we can do this. And the more times you do it, the easier it will get. I have some friends who did like a pull-up challenge last year, for example. I think it was in the month of January. So week 1, every day you do 2 pull-ups.
Yeah.
Week 2, every day you do 4. Week 3, it's 6. Week whatever. And it's a progressive increase. And day 1 sucked, and most of those people couldn't do a single pull-up.
Right.
Day 2, they got half a pull-up. Day 3, they got a pull-up. They're like, yeah, let's go. I did a full pull-up.
Yeah.
And by the end of the month, these people who couldn't do a single pull-up on day 1 were doing like 20 pull-ups unassisted, right?
Yes.
And they didn't do anything special. They didn't take anything special.
Yeah.
They didn't have a secret. All they did was every day they did pull-ups.
They put in the work.
That's right. And there's another route you can take as well. Like obviously, like I said, pull-ups are a do-it exercise, but any pulling exercise will improve your pulling strength, right? So you don't strictly have to do pull-ups or exclusively have to do pull-ups. Dumbbell rows are going to help you. TRX or supine, like horizontal pulls, will develop your back strength. Banded pulls, kettlebell rows, any type of pulling exercise will improve pulling strength. So just developing the musculature in general in as many ways as you can is going to force your body to adapt, and then you will get better.
I like what you said earlier about the sub-maximal effort. So if your max output of pull-ups happens to be 3, well, doing one pull-up throughout a series of whatever your training session segment might be, well, what happens is a little bit at a time, over time, equals a lot. So you're getting hidden reps in, if you will, but they're not hidden. You're actually doing the work a little bit at a time. And before you know it, that 3 becomes 6, that 6 becomes 10, and you're on your way. So I really like that approach. And, like Sam said, there's alternative modalities that you can implement. Anything that is a pulling movement is going to help with your pull up. And a lot of the folks that have the opportunity that I've been so grateful and fortunate to work with, what they'll probably tell you is, oftentimes with the programs that I build for people, there's always 2 pull movements for every 1 push movement, because we tend to be pretty good at pushing things away, but maybe a little bit limited in everything that we're going to pull. So for you, Abdullah, keep it up, keep pulling your way to the success that you're after, but just keep that in mind. Some great advice from Sam. And then I would just add to that, pile on a little bit. For every 2 pulls that you're doing in the gym, think about 1 push, or however you want to look at it. For every 1 push movement, do at least 2 pulls.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I use that with people as well.
And you're eventually going to get there. Just keep at it. And I agree with Sam. It's a do it movement. You cannot look at the bar and I visualize myself being over the bar. Yeah, visualization and imagery is a thing for sure, but you still have to actually do it. Right?
Yes,
so get
absolutely.
out. All right, next question is from Terrence. So Terrence, off the Direct Action YouTube channel, he had a medical related question, and he's interested in employment with JTF2, but as a medic. And he also suggested either JTF2 or CSOR, and he's just kind of wondering what the support specialist breakdown is for employment as a medic, which is awesome. Yes, you can. That's right, and the follow-on question was, once he becomes a medic, can he then try out to be an assaulter, which is great. And yeah, there's guys and buddies of mine who I used to work with that did exactly that. So they came from the Greater Canadian Armed Forces in one trade or another. They applied for that position as a specialist, which is a medical position within the unit. And that selection is a little bit different than assaulter selection, where they do a series of interviews. There's some courses and qualifications that you need to have before you can seek employment as a medic with JTF2. But then once you do become a medic at JTF2, there's a certain amount of time that you have to be in that position before you can make notion to try out as an assaulter, but you can do that 100%. So if this is some of the aspirations and goals that you're after, I think it's awesome, because you are giving to the Canadian Forces on multiple different levels. Whatever trade you're coming from, they're going to benefit from having your employment. When you show interest to become a medic with a unit like JTF2 or CSOR, awesome, because they're going to then benefit from the expertise that you bring from the Canadian Armed Forces. That being said, once you're there, after a certain amount of time, if you're interested in becoming an assaulter, you can definitely go through that pipeline, and that selection process would be no different than anybody else who is trying out for the unit from different components of the Canadian Armed Forces. So hopefully that answers your question, and good for you, because from my experience, the unit, it runs at a very hot tempo, and the medics are very, very much overworked. They're involved with every task, every opportunity, every operation, every deployment. There's typically medics that are attached, so they are very, very busy, but it's also very rewarding. They get some high level advanced medical training. They get an opportunity to work with different organizations, both in the Canadian Forces and outside the Canadian Forces. So I think you'd be very happy, and it would be an avenue for your career that you wouldn't have any regrets, in my opinion.
I have a little question about that.
Sure.
Do you have to have previous medical training to apply for a position like that?
You do, yeah.
So what is like a bare minimum?
So when individuals go to the Canadian Armed Forces to become a medic,
yes.
So there's qualifications throughout the call it, the pipeline of education that the Canadian Forces will provide for a medic. And I forget what they call it, they call it like 3s and 5s. There's a number that's associated, and each number that they undergo for those courses and qualifications, it gives them a higher level of overall medical education. So they're receiving a lot of training in the medical realm, but what happens in some cases is they will get attached to a unit, and maybe unfortunately they're fulfilling a position that they're not really doing a lot of medical work. They might be doing stuff behind the scenes. They might be doing a little bit more administration. They might be, literally stocking shelves or helping out in a support role, but not really going hands-on, which is what they want to do. So it's unfortunate because you have some good people with high talent and high motivation, but they end up becoming a bit stagnant. So what I would recommend for those folks is, let it be known to your chain of command that you want to do more. And when it's known, if you have a good level of chain of command that will help guide you and give you opportunities so you can then be a better version of yourself, they're there. But there's a little bit of onus on the member, and there's also a little bit of onus on the chain of command to communicate and put these things in place. And there's certain protocols and certain training that each medic professional will receive as they're going through their different layers of training. So I don't know if that answers that question. But yeah, as they move up and they have time in the whatever unit they're from, they're going to have exposure to other levels of training. Yeah, that's a good question. Awesome. So hopefully that answers that one for you, Terrence. And then the last one we will address is, so this gentleman, his handle on YouTube is TD. TD, not sure what his first name is, so I reached out to him, said, sure, I'll address this question for you. So his question was, if you've never shot a weapon before and you never did CQB, or you don't even understand CQB principles from any past experience, how hard would it be for you to join SOF? Good question, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who think you need to be a really good shooter, think you really need to know all the intricacies of CQB, you need to be able to jump out of planes. No, none of that is important. They're going to teach you all of that. They're going to teach you everything you need to do. So with JTF2 selection, what is essentially the way it's designed is to test you as an individual. What are your capabilities, you as an individual? What are the attributes that you show and you demonstrate on a regular basis? What a regular basis is in a 7-day selection, there's literally, it's a snapshot of your personality, but it's designed in such a way, and I'm not going to give anything away, but it's designed in such a way that the system, when you go through the process, the cadre will have a real deep understanding of what you are capable of. What I'm getting at, selection is designed for you to prove that you are teachable and that you have attributes that are worthy of expanding the training element of your ability. So on selection, you don't have to be a good shooter. In fact, it's not important at all. What's important is your ability to listen to instructions, understand what those instructions are, and then apply them to the best of your ability. So for folks out there who have done selection in the past, and you have good intentions, and you want to help out your buddy who's maybe trying out, what I would suggest to you is say nothing other than good luck and train hard. Give him nothing, because by giving him any indication of what's happening on day 1 or day 2 or day 3, you're not helping him, because the reality is selection could have changed, and the platform that's in place may have changed from previous years. But B, the unit doesn't benefit from a guy coming through the pipeline who knows exactly what's going to happen on day 1, exactly what's going to happen on day 2, and so on. So for, to keep it as simple as possible, keep your mouth shut. If you've gone through the pipeline, keep your trap shut. If you want to help your buddy, encourage him to train hard. Because when you're on selection, we don't care if you're a good shooter. We don't care if you've done CQB in the past. We don't care if you know how to jump out of planes. They're going to teach you all that. The unit is going to teach you all of those skills. On selection, you come prepared, willing, and open to learn, and understand that what you do and how you approach certain challenges is what you're being assessed for. Mm-hmm. All right? So how good you are at certain skills, it's not important. So I hope that answers the question. If you are interested and this is what you want to do, man, talk to the recruiting, your local recruiting office that's close to your proximity. talk to your chain of command, but just know that, you know, on selection, what they're testing you for is your personality attributes. You know, are you teachable? Do you have what it takes to you know, really go on further, with training? So 7 days followed by almost a full year, very, very different. All right, so there's a 7-day selection, and then there's almost a full-on year course where you're continuously being assessed and monitored, and you're on selection. It's just a different variation of selection.
Right. And I think what you were getting at too about, like, if you know somebody who's going to be trying out and you've seen the process, to not, you know, divulge all the secrets, like, it kind of does yourself a disservice, right? Like, if you're the person trying out, because you're taking a shortcut and you may not show your true self to the guys who are assessing you. Like, maybe you won't show what they're looking for because you've, you know, had the secrets and you've had some shortcuts. Like, maybe you won't be able to perform what they're looking for because you're trying to get ahead of the game. Like, there's not really a shortcut, right? Like,
there is no shortcut. It needs to be genuine. There is no shortcut. And for those folks out there who, you know, think they're going to impress by showing something or trying to, you know, trick the system, if you will, it does you a disservice. It does not help your case. So what I recommend to folks is go in there as prepared as you possibly can, and whatever information they are asking of you, you try to apply that information to the best of your ability. That's all you can do. That is literally all you can do. If you're trying to outsmart the system, and, you know, a buddy of mine told me on day 3, this is what's going to happen after lunch, forget all that. Forget all that, because your buddy is telling you that story. Maybe he went through it but was unsuccessful. Maybe you need to question, all right, he was unsuccessful. Is the advice from him something that I should take? Right? Now, and, you know, to your question, and to pile on the point, the unit, you know, it's a highly functioning professional organization. They know exactly who they're looking for and what type of person they're looking for. So for you to try to trick them or outsmart them, it's not going to bode well for you. So just be genuine, be yourself, be as prepared as you possibly can, and you know, let the chips fall as they may.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're probably doing a disservice to your future teammates, right? Like, if you go in under kind of some false pretenses, maybe, like, trying to just, like, win, like, you yourself want to win, because it's not just about you, right? Like, when you get in, like, it's about you and your unit. I don't know the correct terminology to use, but you and the guys who you're surrounded by. It's more about the others and your role with the others, as opposed to just you succeeding. It's about everybody succeeding.
It is. It's a team. It is a team function, 100%. And with everything that's going on, you know, in today's world, you know, it's easy for people to self-internalize and looking and say, what about me? What about me? You know, and I'm gonna draw a correlation right now with everything that's going on. Unless it affects the individual directly, people are not as interested. But the moment it affects the individual, they become very interested. It's not like that at the unit. We look left, we look right. The guys that are to your left and to your right are the most important thing in the whole function and the success of the unit. Because if the guy to your left and to your right isn't pulling his weight, he's doing you a disservice. And if you're not pulling your weight, you're doing these two guys a disservice. So it is very much a team function where we need to bring our A game on a regular basis. And we also know that the guy to the left and the guy to the right, he's doing the same thing, right? So there is a lot of that goes on in the unit. And you know, like, you know, this is what I share with people that are working with me and they're trying to achieve these things. Like, and it's funny too, when like a bit of comfort and rapport is built, you'll see guys sometimes will overstep. They're asking questions and they'll overstep, and then the moment that they overstep, and I'll draw that line and very clearly and abruptly, I won't answer that question, and don't ask the question again, right? Because it's not going to help you and it's not going to help the unit. You know, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I know you didn't know. That's why it's all good. Like, you're asking because you're interested, and I get it. But understand, like, there's a line, right? I will help you prepare, you know, physically, psychologically. I'll help you get ready for some of the challenges. But there's, you know, when those questions start to, you know, go a little bit deeper in detail, full stop. It's not happening.
Right.
No. Cool. Awesome. Was there any other questions on this one?
I don't think so.
Okay.
A lot of stuff today tied into kind of like preparation and how best to be prepared. like, you know, there was a question about your past self, like if there was any advice you would give yourself, like after everything we've said, does any of that need kind of further explanation?
Yeah, I mean, so in summary, you know, you're right. There's a lot of this that is about guys that are interested in doing other things with the professional careers that they have chosen. And to kind of bring it back, the advice that, you know, I would give my 24 or 25-year-old self, you know, train smart, but train specific to only what you know, right? You can only control the variables of what you know. So if that means, you know, you work with a professional and they identify that you have some discrepancies in your left side or your right side, well, that's a good thing. Now you know that, and you can help rectify that. So when you do cross that line and you're ready to get after it, you're in the best position to be successful as you can. So move well. That's essentially what I'm trying to bring that back to. Be able to move your body really, really well. So be able to jump well, be able to pull well, be able to push well, have an anaerobic threshold capacity that is sustainable for, you know, a decent amount of time. What is a decent amount of time? I don't know, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, short bursts, long bursts, you know, arduous long walks where you're carrying weight on your back. All of these things are factors of different energy systems that will be tapped into. So, you know, put yourself through the ringer, understand where your strengths and limitations are, and then remember try to, as best as you possibly can, apply the 70-30 principle. So 70% of the things that we need to create as strengths, and then 30% keep working on those things that are already strong.
I just thought of something that I wanted to ask,
Please.
which was, so your 25-year-old self, did you have a coach? Did you have somebody who was helping you prepare and think about, you know, the 3 buckets of important physical traits that we talked about, or were you freestyling it? And if you could change that, would you?
Yeah, I would. Yes, I would. I was stubborn. I didn't have a coach, but I also didn't seek a coach. Right. At that time, there was, in the Canadian Armed Forces, they have what's referred to as PSP. So PSP are personnel support. It's a system in place that help develop athletes. It helps members with their, you know, strength and conditioning goals, and they can put programs together for the members, which is awesome. And now there's systems in place to help individuals become better prepared physically. And, you know, those were there when I was trying out, but I didn't utilize them and I didn't reach out to them. I did everything freestyle, and, you know, to be honest, it's not that long ago, but I wasn't on YouTube, you know, watching what the soft guy was doing. I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't following any programs. This guy used to be soft. I wasn't doing any of that. And that is readily accessible now. And there's some good ones out there, and there's some junk. So, you know, tread carefully. But none of that was available. So I just freestyled it. I trained extremely hard, and I did at least 3 sessions a day on average. At least 3 sessions a day. I would purposely wake myself up, in some cases, you know, at 4 in the morning, get a session in, go to work, do a session with, you know, my platoon at the time, lunchtime, do something, after work, when I was home, I would do another session. That was pretty typical. And it would be a mixture of carrying rucksacks, running with a rucksack. I would do stuff in the pool. I would do stuff with combat boots on. I would do stuff in the woods. I would run a lot. I did a lot of running, a lot of pull-ups, a lot of push-ups, a lot of sit-ups, and just really just went through the grinder. And when I was, you know, I remember thinking, man, I think I'm pretty fit. Like, I can, you know, I was running a mile and a half on pretty consistent basis, around 7:30, 7:40, any given day, and any condition. I would literally be eating my meal, be halfway through, and, you know, I would sometimes just like, all right, now's the time. So I push my plate aside, put my shoes on, and then boom, run. So half, you know, belly full of food, and I would hit it. And oftentimes it was like between 7:30 and 7:40, consistently. So I was running a lot, and then I would do pull-ups and push-ups a lot. And just when I thought, like I said, I thought I was fit enough, like, nope, I gotta do more. So I would just keep adding to it. Yeah, and it worked, because once I, you know, got to selection, at that time they used to do like a bit of a pre-selection. So they'd run you through the ringer, you know, do some formality tests and some baseline tests to see where you're at, you know, a grip strength test and a VO2 max. And I remember doing the VO2 max. It was the first time ever being exposed to the VO2 max. And they get you strapped up to that machine, and you start running on the treadmill, and you're just doing what you're told, right? Just run. Knowing that selection was, I think it was either the next day or we had 2 days, I don't remember. But it's all part, to me, it was all part of selection. So I would just give her and I would do what I could. So I'm on this machine going at it as full bore as I possibly can, to the point where you feel like your head's gonna explode. And then at some point, like every person has a limit. So you get off the machine. And what I remember is the feedback, and I didn't get it at the time because I didn't know, right? It's just like, next, next. But what I received at the end was my VO2 max score at that time was equivalent to an elite athlete. Now, what is an elite athlete? What is an Olympic athlete? I don't know. So it didn't really mean a lot to me at the time, but all I knew, I was fit. Yeah. Right? All I knew is this thing had capacity and it was working. So whatever I did worked. Right. But I will caveat that with, some sustained injuries later on in my career. I do think, there was an accumulation of just wear and tear. Mm-hmm. And not probably, 100%. I had some underdeveloped components of my body. For example, hamstrings were underdeveloped, quads were overdeveloped, caused me some knee problems. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at the time. Probably could have fixed that had I hired a coach, or had I leaned on maybe PSP at the time to help me out. Didn't do that. So I was just really just pushing through with grit and toughness.
Yeah. So you would recommend that people should get a professional opinion on at least some aspects of their performance?
I would recommend that for sure. There's so many out there. They're readily accessible and people want to help, right? Mm-hmm. So, do your due diligence, do a little bit of research before you just throw your money at somebody. But I would say, do that. Get somebody to give you a legitimate, breakdown and assessment of where you're at, strengths and limitations, and any discrepancies, asymmetries that you need to address. That's really, I would say that would be good advice to take, because if you can get ahead of it before it becomes an injury, or before it becomes that thing that's going to be the deterrent for your overall success, well, why not? Why not do that, right? Yeah, 100%.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, anything you want to add and closing out?
I don't think so. No, I think we covered a lot of really good stuff.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, for all of you out there, men, women, athletes, tactcial athletes, regular Joe, soccer moms, everybody has got questions, and if Sam and I can address those questions for you, please feel free. This is for you. Take it, leave it. It's there's no fee, so this is for you. Keep the comments coming, guys. We love it, and it's awesome to see that there's interactions within people who are watching the channel. So that's really good too. We're trying to spread the good. We're trying to just share what we can share, in the time that we have, and hopefully, if this is a new trajectory into a positive change in one person, I can't speak for Sam, but to me that's a success. So keep it up, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and take care of yourself.